your country
Kennedy has been shot.
to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The early 20th century started off the Great War. People came into the war with enthusiasm, having no ideas of the terrors ahead. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary set the stage for tragic trench warfare, leaving many veterans with shell shock or ultimate PTSD as a result of the war. With the modernization of technology came the use of extreme weapons like the machine gun, tank, and poisonous gases. Countries around the world had become a moral wasteland. Yet war led to the extreme growth of the assembly line and increased consumer growth, causing one of the biggest economic decades the world has ever seen. President Harding tried to get American society back to its feet with his back to normalcy policy. Republicans promised to return to pre-World War I conditions. Harding and his successor, Calvin Coolidge's administrations carried the same ideology: do nothing and let the world bounce back on its own. The factor of prohibition was in place, but that only made the urge for people to drink stronger. Illegal sales of alcohol by bootleggers and illegal alcohol pubs were at an all-time high. The Roaring Twenties led to a lost generation of writers and artists which depicted the illusions of the decade and expressed cynicism about democracy, peace, and prosperity through their arts. The lost generation was a part of good times where the values were lost to changing times. Part of this generation was F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby, which depicted the beliefs of the lost generation. It expressed the story of an illusioned Gatsby and his desire for the American dream and his love, Daisy. Within the stories are enormous parties depicting the Roaring Twenties and how the decade challenged inherited American values. People were riotous and rude, drank how they pleased, and partied as if it was their last living day. Nick represents the lost generation, always questioning American values and whether the region in which he lived challenges his moral beliefs. Now the question remains, how do we keep generations from becoming lost?
Here's an original newscast from the 1920s during a day when the famous bootlegger and soldier Jay Gatsby died.
Hi, I'm Christian Velez.
And I'm Laura Wisniewski.
This is EBC News. Today's the first day of autumn and it couldn't be better.
Except Prohibition.
Cheers to that. What?
What? We just got word that Mr. Jay Gatsby has been shot and killed.
I'm afraid that means no more parties.
Gatsby has been having an affair with Mrs. Daisy Buchanan.
Rumors that this generation has been lost may be true.
Relationships seem to be more broken than ever, and materialism seems to prosper.
As we get more news on this tragedy, we'll keep you folks updated.
Here's a clip of current psychiatrist Madeline Dalton analyzing Jay Gatsby and his relationships.
Gatsby represents a man that was in the war and returned with a lack of morals, resulting in his failure to make successful relationships with people based on trustworthy information. He was only driven by his meaningless desires of money and the idea of obtaining Daisy. Daisy is the typical jazz-age materialistic woman. She married Tom for his money and became infatuated with Gatsby once again because she realizes he is now better off and is fascinated by it. In the end, however, she chooses Tom for the stability of his old money that belongs to a family rather than Gatsby's ill-earned riches.
And just like we promised, we're back with more news on millionaire Jay Gatsby's death.
Our assumption the last time we were on air seems to be becoming more and more true.
The assumption that materialism, desire, living in the past, and the disillusion of the American dream has truly made our generation lost.
Although nobody really knew who Jay Gatsby was, they attended his parties anyways for the free alcohol and to escape the effects of the war.
It's almost like we're living in a lost society, where these themes of materialism and disillusion seem to be prevailing.
Hopefully future generations can learn from their mistakes in the eggs and not become lost again.
The Roaring Twenties, filled with parties and riotous behavior, was the beginning of a century-long decline in which inherited American values were challenged by riotous and destructive behaviors. Disastrous war, reliance on alcohol, and spiritual alienation caused a decade of little moral values and ultimate lostness.
Here's historian and analyst Audrey McConaughey speaking about the themes of the time period.
Gatsby's parties used the opportunity as an escape after the war and from the time of change. Materialism, especially in and around New York, was a corrupting factor in the lives of those who lived there. Materialism and the idea of a disillusioned past are essential themes expressed in Gatsby society. Rather than face the reality of the time period, many work to create a glossy image of the past. The best example is in Gatsby's idealization of Daisy as a desire and in his inability to see her for who she is.
The loss of values during the 1920s still affects modern-day generations. As shown through modern-day politics, morals like acceptance of diversity and kind-heartedness have been stripped away. Society is more lost than ever. Society is not unfixable, though. Judgment against those who are seen as different should be held back because difference is part, we are all human beings. Modern society also needs to put personal happiness in front of materialism and wealth. Focusing on being the richest and having the best items causes the loss of inherited values, the lost generation being an example.
The lost generation focused on materialism as a comfort mechanism. They did not express moral or spiritual values and lived their lives recklessly. For some people, desire drove them to a completely new lifestyle in order to try and reach their aspirations. The lack of focusing on reality was extremely high, and disillusionment surrounded the country. Looking back on these times, the way people lived was not very ideal. These days, we need to learn from these mistakes. Value should be the focus of people instead of materialism. Having high values can steer people in the direction of living good, moral lives instead of reckless ones. Happiness should come before wealth and materialism. Desire for things that can't be controlled should be let go, and reality needs to be acknowledged in everyday life. Overall, the lost generation is a good source to learn from by acknowledging their mistakes and ensuring to not repeat these mistakes in future times.
Instead of being the best, we need to focus on being ourselves. I'm Miles Reed.